I will call to order the April 20th ONCC Technical Committee meeting. And Jeanette, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Arlington Heights. Bensonville.
Here.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Here.
41st Ward.
Here.
Des Plaines. Hanover Park.
Here.
Harwood Heights. Itasca.
Here.
Norwich.
Here.
Palatine.
Here.
Park Ridge.
Here.
River Grove.
Here.
Rolling Meadows. Schaumburg.
Here.
Wooddale. And School District 59.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Jeanette. Can I seek approval of the minutes of the previous tech committee?
I'll move so.
A second.
I'll second Hanover Park.
Do we have to do a roll call on this, Jeanette, or is it all in favor?
Yes, roll call.
All right, please call the roll.
Bensonville.
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Yes.
41st Ward.
Yes.
Des Plaines. Hanover Park.
Yes.
Harwood Heights. Itasca.
4.
Norwich.
Yes.
Palatine.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
River Grove.
Yes.
Rolling Meadows. Schaumburg. Wooddale.
Sorry. Yes.
Wooddale. And School District 59.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the 2020 annual runway use report. Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. Let me pull up these reports. So we've had a lot of requests and questions about runway utilization. So we thought it might be helpful if we do a annual runway use report for O'Hare for the calendar year 2020. We put together 3 reports, all hours of the day, showing utilization for O'Hare for the entire day on average, annualized for the year. And then we have daytime from the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. as well as nighttime. The runways reports are familiar as to what you see in the typical ANOMS reports, where we have the average runway use table, as well as the arrows showing the percent utilization for each runway end. It's important to note that we do have 9 center, 27 center depicted on these reports. However, as we discussed previously at this committee and others, the runway was commissioned on November 5th, but did not see any significant operations until February of this year. So these reports will be distributed to the committee as well for your use. And so unless there's any questions or discussion on annual runway use, that completes item 4A.
Just to be clear, that runway utilization is operations, right?
Correct. It is operations that are, we look at the entire year and then average it out for an average annual day. And so you get the average departures and arrivals for one day, as shown on the table. And then the utilization is the percentage each runway utilize those operations, or the operations utilize that runway, I should say. So for instance, this is the runway use for all hours for 2020. You can see 28 right handled 47% of the operations in departures in 2020. Whereas on the arrival side, 28 center handled 28% of the arrivals in 2020.
Great, thank you. So yeah, this is a document that over time we can use to compare year to year how the air traffic's changing at O'Hare. Does anyone have any questions for the annual runway use report for Ryan? Seeing none, we'll move on to crosswind or runway discussion. Ryan's going to handle this one, and I think we're going to analyze how the crosswind runways are used. Ryan.
Yes, so there has been a lot of discussion in this committee as well as the Flight Quiet Committee, just regarding the Crosswind runway utilizations, the runways 4 left, 22 right, 4 right, 22 left. We wanted to take an opportunity to discuss a little bit more in detail these runways and how they're used, specifically because recently, as of last month, we had wind conditions that required the use of these runways significantly on several days. And so we want to take a look at why that is, and a closer look at that day and how the crosswind runways were utilized to handle the wind conditions that occurred at O'Hare. So just kind of an overview of the crosswind runways, the 422s. In the Chicagoland area, the optimum runway configuration for our region is a east-west parallel runway configuration due to the predominant east-west winds that we see in the region, paired with a northeast-southwest oriented crosswind runways to handle certain times of the year when we do have significant winds out of the north or the south. As I've said many times in these meetings and others, you'll hear me utter the line, wind is one of the key factors in determining runway use. So aircraft prefer to take off and land into the wind, and there are certain times of the year where the wind is strong enough coming out of the either north or the south that will exceed what's referred to as the crosswind component for the parallel runways. And so aircraft are no longer able to operate safely on the parallels because the wind direction exceeds their limits. So not only the direction, but also the speed, I should point out. So O'Hare, over the year experiences very seasonal, strong southerly or northerly winds that require the use of these two runways for these two parallel crosswind runways. They're used as much as 250 hours a year, which when you're thinking of a year, that's not exactly a significant amount. So it doesn't happen frequently, but when it does happen, it's good that we have these crosswind runways to handle the wind conditions and operations. So last month, actually the day after our last technical committee meeting, we had very strong winds coming from the northeast throughout the day that required the use of the crosswind runways. We had sustained winds in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range with gusts close to 50 miles an hour. So really significantly strong winds that again exceeded that what's referred to as, excuse me, the crosswind component for those parallel runways for the operators using the parallel runways. So the airport had to reorient itself and use the crosswind runways to allow for safe conditions with those winds. So when we look at the day, and this chart here is the hourly operations for March 18th, we have it color-coded by runway and operation type. So you'll see for each hour we have arrivals or departures on parallel runways. So arrivals are yellow and departures are light blue. And so those are the operations occurring on our parallel runways. And then the operations on our crosswind runways are red and green. So you'll see as we get into the afternoon, early afternoon hours, the airport switched to arriving on 4 right and departing on 4 left. Around 2:30, I think between 2:30 and 5:30, during that 3-hour period, there were significant sustained winds coming from the northeast that required the use of those two runways. And as you can see, around the 3:45 to 4:30 p.m. mark, we were solely on those two crosswind runways. The airport wasn't really using any of the other runways because of those winds. And so let me pull up a replay of the day on WebTrack just so you can just get another idea of what that looked like. So again, this is March 18th at 3:45 p.m. in the afternoon. You can see, I hope everyone can see, we're looking at O'Hare. The red aircraft are arrivals coming into O'Hare, and the dark green aircraft are departures. You might see some gray airplanes or other red or green airplanes. Those are from other airports or Midway. In the lower right, you'll see our weather panel, and you can see at this time, northeast winds at 31 knots, and that's the sustained wind, not accounting for the gusts. Like I said, the gusts were exceeding that considerably. So I'm gonna start the replay, and I've sped it up a bit just for the interest of time. But you'll see here that we're arriving on runway 4 right, and we'll be departing off of runway 4 left. And all the operations that occurred in this replay right now are operating off of those 2 runways. Now, this is not to say that all of the operations that were scheduled to operate on this day were able to utilize these runways, but when the wind conditions dictated it, these runways were able to accommodate the vast majority of operations. I should also note that, you know, the sustained wind, that northeast wind, pretty much being a direct headwind for these aircraft taking off, significantly helps their performance when they're departing. So aircraft that, you know, might on a warm, hot day in the summer might need longer runway. On a day like this in particular, might be able to use a shorter runway because that headwind allows the aircraft to operate much more efficiently and get off the ground much quicker, as you can imagine.
Brian, let's live life on the edge. Let's speed this up a little bit. Come on, 6X, we can do better than that.
Sometimes my kids say I drive too fast, so I like to start slow.
There we go. Look at this.
Important to note here, here's a Boeing 747-400 cargo aircraft. It is going to Anchorage, Alaska. So that is a wide body aircraft, cargo aircraft. Now, I don't know what the weight was of that aircraft. It's probably going to Anchorage to refuel, but it was able to use that 7,500 foot runway with that significant headwind to depart.
So can you enlighten us? You know, this is pretty impressive to see all these aircraft utilizing these runways. What did delays look like, or were there any reroutes of arriving aircraft that couldn't land at O'Hare during this time period?
You know, I wasn't able to, you know, pull up an exact count of any reroutes or delays per se, but we did have cancellations on the day. But I do need to caveat, you know, the cancellations could be a number of factors. So you have one factor being that, you know, for a certain period of the day, we're operating predominantly off of these 2 runways, or the winds dictated that these were the safest runways to use at that time. That because this is a period of the time that tends to be a peak time for O'Hare, we are only using 2 runways. And as you know, when we're using the parallels, we have a triple parallel approach. So we're utilizing up to 3 runways to arrive and 2 runways to depart. So the efficiency and the throughput goes down, and that results in delays and also potential cancellations. We also have potential cancellations because aircraft that were maybe scheduled to depart at this time weren't able, or because of the reduced capacity at the airport due to the winds, the aircraft that may be planning to come in and then depart in the next 45 minutes had to be either rescheduled or canceled. So there were a high number of cancellations on this day, primarily due to the significant use of this orientation of runways during those afternoon hours. But again, there's many other factors that go into those cancellations.
So I think this is important to see for everyone, and myself included, that during a peak operation period at O'Hare, the airport was able to get a lot of, when we talk throughput, a lot of aircraft were able to utilize these runways, including wide body aircrafts using 7,500 foot runway. And then we apply this and we extrapolate this to the fly quiet and the rotation plan that we're working on. And we know that the utilization in the crosswind weeks was pitiful, but this clearly shows that that's a structural problem. That's not a physical problem, if that makes sense. The airplanes can use these runways. We just need to get them to use these runways. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
I will say that outreach, tracking, accountability, all those factors will have, yes, show quite a bit improvement of the utilization of the preferential runways when those get defined in a new program. I think when we, kind of look back at tests 1, 2, and 3, as well as IFQ, the utilization of the crosswinds seemed to fall off a bit, and there's many reasons why that may have been, but I do believe that stronger outreach and tracking, really, holding, having the ONCC really keep involved and tracking what's going on and be a part of the outreach will go to great lengths to improve the utilization of those runways in any flight quiet program.
I don't think it's possible to get to 100% utilization of crosswind weeks. I don't think anybody's trying for that, but I think this goes to show that if we got to 80% utilization, it would be effective and reasonable to get to a number like that if we actually put our heads to it and figured out how to do it.
Yes, there's definitely room for improvement, and the airport can operate on those 2 runways, and we should, if the flight quiet committee does have a proposed program that schedules those runways, then we should do everything we can to make sure everyone is aware of the program, on board with it, and doing their best to stick to that plan.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question from Ernie. Ernie, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gavin. Ryan, were there any other extenuating circumstances that day other than the prevailing winds being out of a 040 orientation, i.e. were there runway closures, or were there other things that took place that day?
Well, I'm not aware of anything that significantly drove the use of those runways based on closures other than wind. But there, of course, runway 9 right, 27 left is closed right now for that extension construction project that's occurring right now. But other than that, I'm not aware.
And just as a follow-up, I'd make the assumption that on that day, there wouldn't have been anyone, given the high crosswind component on any of the parallels, that anyone would have requested a long alternative. Even though I realize we're talking about daytime operations and not fly quiet, but I'm guessing nobody would have asked for 10 center or 10 left that day.
Actually, I do believe there were a few that did use those runways. I think it may have been a couple during this time period, long haul flights.
Is there any way that and finally, is there any way that we can take a look at the operation of that day and go, all right, since we were in a 2 runway configuration, 1 departure, 1 arrival, how much we had to downshift to maintain the operation?
We can look into that.
Thank you.
I don't have that today.
No, I'm just curious as to how much the FAA had to, in the tower, had to slow down operations, even given the cancellations, because we had such a different operation, if you will, than we wouldn't have had we had not had the winds that strong out of a 040 that day.
Yeah, we can look into that. Just a couple things to add on to that, though, is that this is, again, daytime, so the operation levels are much higher than they would be at nighttime. And two, I just want to make sure everyone knows when we're talking about those requests, it's truly the last decision maker is the pilot in command of the aircraft. The air traffic control, the Department of Aviation, no one else really makes the deciding factor if an aircraft is going to safely take off or land from a runway. That is always left to the pilot in command. And so if the pilot in command sees wind conditions that are either favorable or not favorable for a certain orientation or runway length, then it's up to their sole discretion to either request a different runway or not take off or land at that time.
I'd like to bring Mr. Ickes to the floor. Mr. Ickes.
Yes, this is Frank from 41st Ward. Ryan, to Evan's point of possibly using the Crosswind runways more often, would that 747 that was going to Anchorage be able to take off were it not for the wind conditions that we had that day?
I cannot answer that because I don't know the specific circumstances regarding that specific aircraft. However, that is not the only time we've saw plenty of 747-400s utilize that runway for departures and or arrivals in the past during flight quiet. So it's not impossible. But the specifics regarding that flight, I don't know what the weights were or anything else.
Okay, well, the impression that I was given here is that the use of those two runways, it's like they're there for the 250 hours a year that we need them. So would it be wise to consider them for nighttime use regularly if we don't need them? I guess I'm saying, if they're only used 250 hours a year, could you put them into any schedule where you would use them throughout the year?
So the plan for the O'Hare Airfield is, the predominant parallel runway configuration paired with those specific crosswinds to really have full coverage of the predominant wind conditions in the Chicagoland area. Now, that gives us a whole lot of pavement to work with at night. And one of the things we have talked about as far as a flight quiet program is that we're not building a flight quiet program around specific wind conditions. We're looking at it as we have all this available runways at night. Is there an opportunity to disperse some of the operations at night to help alleviate some of the noise impacts that occur during the overnight hours? And so to your question, I think if I understand it correctly, the answer is, well, that's pavement that is available. It can be used at night if the wind and weather conditions and other factors allow for it. And so I guess from my opinion, there's no reason why we couldn't include it in a program.
Okay, thank you.
At 250 hours, that's just a metric. That's not a regulation or a cap by any means, right?
That is when we're looking at, when we're doing the plan for, the airfield and looking at what are the winds, doing wind studies and looking at historic winds, and that 250 hours is what is kind of modeled to be those runways have to or should be used to accommodate those really strong north or south winds throughout the year. It's not only to be used for 250 hours, or it's only safe to use 250 hours. It's typically 250 hours a year. We have wind conditions at O'Hare that dictate the use of those runways.
Thank you. And can you remind us what the rating on those crosswind runways are?
That's a good question. I believe those are, Aaron, you want to chime in here? Because brain is going blank.
Those are Group 5 runways.
Group 5s, thank you.
6 of the runways are Group 5 runways. 9 center and 10 center are Group 6 runways.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments regarding the use of crosswind runways? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our semi-regularly scheduled update on impacts due to COVID-19 at O'Hare.
Okay, let me pull that one up. Okay, so this is our regular update on the passenger and operation levels tracking, comparing to what we saw in 2019 pre-pandemic, what we saw last year, and where we're at today. So the first slide here is our daily TSA checkpoint levels, comparing 2019, 2020, and 2021. These are, actual daily passenger through the checkpoints. In red, you'll see the 2019 levels, and in yellow are the 2021 levels. And as you can see, we have a sort of a strong climb back to closer levels to where we were 2 years ago. That's thanks due to, of course, the rollout and availability of vaccines, the spring and warmer weather. People are really, again, this is mostly leisure travelers, not business or international travelers. People are really itching to get out and go somewhere. And so we're starting to see those passenger levels climb, especially through the spring weeks here as people went on trips for spring break. But you can see we're much better off than where we were a year ago, with that kind of faded blue line in the background, and hopefully that will continue to fade into our memory, as 2020 was a pretty difficult year for everyone. This is O'Hare specific TSA checkpoint throughput. And as you can see, the same pattern here, we're looking at strong passenger levels coming through the terminal in the spring months into March and April. Midway fared even better. Southwest, again, is really caters to that leisure traveler, and the operation levels have come back quite a bit at Midway, thanks to strong schedules by Southwest Airlines to their kind of leisure markets in the Southwest and Southeast. These are operation levels, average operation levels for 2019 versus 2021. We're still year to date about a 46% reduction. That red line again is 2019 operation levels versus 2021 in yellow, but the operations are climbing back in these spring months, again, as we see continued availability as people get vaccinated as well and feel safer traveling. The airlines are responding with opening up their schedules and providing more opportunities for people to travel. Midway, again, that strong kind of spring break month at Midway that we always see, again, has resulted in stronger operation levels at the airport. But still 42% below on average year to date where we were in 2019. This chart shows our operation levels for a lot of the domestic markets compared to 2021. These are basically the percentage of levels that each airport is at compared to those 2020 levels. And they're color coded by region. So you'll see, on the left-hand side of the screen, a lot of greens and some blues and yellows. The greens are the south, yellows are southwest. So that's reflective of a lot of the leisure traveler this spring, going to warmer climates and trying to get out of the house and do something. You also see the checkered bars. Those are cargo hubs. Again, Memphis, again, really strong operation levels. Never really saw any significant impact due to COVID, due to the strong cargo demand that we've seen across the country, as well as here at O'Hare. In the middle to the right, you'll see the, excuse me, the reds, Midwest markets, and the far right, the Northeast markets that have fared the worst through the pandemic. And you'll see LaGuardia on the far right really is still well below. That's primarily due, that is, that airport sees a lot of international traffic, and countries are still closed to international travel. So that that airport is still very low operation levels compared to where we were pre-pandemic. And then this slide again is showing for O'Hare those dedicated passenger airlines operations and dedicated cargo. On the left, you'll see average passenger operations for O'Hare through March, and then that faded line comparing to 2020. We continue to see strong operation trends here in the spring months. On the right-hand side is those that are dedicated operations per day that are dedicated cargo. And as you'll see, we continue to see strong cargo growth at O'Hare. We're even above where we were, well above where we were in January of 2020. And so O'Hare continues to see growth in cargo operations as that cargo demand continues to increase. And then again, the last slide, the aviation system shock and recoveries. Again, the message here is there has been many shocks to the system over the years, to the aviation system. However, it has always recovered. COVID-19 is the most significant, and it will take some time to recover, but we are already seeing really strong indicators, again, rollout of vaccines and people's comfort level with traveling starting to increase. And we were also seeing airlines starting to hire pilots, which is a real strong indicator that things are coming back. Those are new hires, not necessarily airlines bringing back pilots or mechanics that were furloughed during the pandemic, but actual new hires. So that's looking at growth, which is a real great indicator that things are recovering. So that is the update on the COVID-19 pandemic impacts and completes item 4C.
Thank you, Ryan. This is probably a question for Aaron. Does O'Hare or CDA rather have any internal projections for when things will get back to 2019 levels? Is that a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year?
The CDA doesn't have anything of our own, but the FAA was tentatively anticipating a 5-year recovery for Midway, and I think a 5 or 6 year recovery for O'Hare. Once a year, we come to you with the TAF, which is the terminal area forecast. I don't know if we did that earlier this year, but we certainly can. And that's the data set that we're looking at when we see that. And that'll likely change because, the projections for the rate of recovery 6 months ago is probably very different than it is today. Now that we have, multiple vaccines. So that likely will continue to change. So right now we are relying on the FAA forecast as an indicator.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you anecdotally, our residents have started to complain about air traffic noise again. So I view that as a return to normal, if you will, of things getting back to normal. So as flights pick up, residents start complaining, that's probably good for the economy. Does anyone else have any comments regarding the COVID-19 pandemic impacts on O'Hare? All right. And our favorite Vildana.
Good morning. I'll be
How are you?
brief. Today, there's not much activity on the portable noise monitors. Since the last update, we have only canceled one residential application. This was from a resident in Chicago, Ward 41. She applied about a year ago in March of 2020. And then when we attempted to schedule the deployment, she preferred to wait until the air traffic volume goes back to somewhat normal levels. But since then, we have attempted to contact her several times with no success, so we canceled the application. The municipal monitor is also available to be requested, as are the 8 residential portable monitors. Ryan, can you pull up the long-term portable monitor report? Thank you. This is for site D, Chicago Ward 39, North Park Village. The February DNL level was at 46.7, which is the lowest in a long time, if not ever. And this is due to the closure of runway 9 right, 27 left on February 1st. It was closed for extension of work. And if there are no questions on this one, let's move on to the permanent noise monitor update. Unfortunately, I don't have much to report, but we have been working in the background on obtaining the Chicago monitor permits. Those are for sites 39 in Chicago Ward 39, site 40, Chicago Ward 40, and site 46 in Chicago Ward 39. We're expecting to get the permit any day now. So I have a meeting scheduled, or our site walkthrough scheduled with our contractor this afternoon, so that we are ready to begin work as soon as we get the permit. For the suburban sites, and these are the relocations, site 7 in Des Plaines, we are in contact with ComEd and are currently waiting for ComEd to install a secondary riser before we can proceed with the rest of the installation. Similar status in Niles, also in communication with ComEd. This work is expected to be completed in the next 2 weeks for both site 45 in Niles and site 7 Des Plaines. And then site 28 Schiller Park, our consultant is working on installing the mast this week. So hopefully at the next update or next meeting, I will have more of a progress shown on this chart. And that's all I have unless there are questions.
Any questions for Vildana? Seeing none, we'll move on to fact sheets and manual updates.
All right, let me pull up. Just wanted to share with you just some minor updates we did to some of the fact sheets and manuals, just to incorporate the opening of runway 9 center, 27 center. As you know, this committee well aware, we have a existing fly quiet program in place. It is outdated, and that is why we're doing all of that hard work in the Fly Quiet Committee to get a new program in place. However, this program is still in effect, and so the manual, we just wanted to make sure it was up to date and captured the full airfield as it is today. So we've just added 9 center, 27 center to several of the pages of the manual. It is important to note that this runway is not a part of the current program and is not what's referred to as a preferential nighttime runway in the existing Fly Quiet program. You'll see on this page, the red runways are pretty much what is left of the existing runways that were part of the original Fly Quiet program that are defined as preferential for nighttime use. And so 9 center, 27 center is unfortunately not one of those runways. And again, we also have the nighttime departure procedures, 9 center, 27 center added to this graphic. And the same story, these departure procedures are in place for runways that were existing at the time of development of the original Fly Quiet program. 9 center, 27 center was not one of those runways and does not have a recommended nighttime departure procedure. Again, as we talk in Flight Quiet Committee, these departure procedures are vector headings, and similar to what we're working on in the Flight Quiet Committee with the new program in coming up with the possibility of new vector headings for the runways that are available. No change to this graphic or this. The ground run-up locations exhibit, again, adding 9 Center, 27 Center, along with the location of our current alternate locations and the ground run-up enclosure. And we also try to keep this diagram up to date as much as possible. It is the airport layout diagram. As you can imagine, this diagram changes frequently with the amount of construction that has occurred at O'Hare over the last several years. So we try to keep it up to date as much as possible. And so this brings it up to date at least through the end of last year. We'll probably do another update, once completion of 9 Right 27 left is completed at the end of this year. And hopefully after this year, the majority of airfield projects as far as runways goes will be completed, as well as the associated taxiways. And then the land use map showing the areas of compatible and non-compatible land use. Again, non-compatible refers to those areas with heavy residential concentrations, adding 9 Center, 27 Center to this graphic. And so that is the update for the Flight Quiet Manual. In addition to that, we also had an update to the Ground Run-Up Procedures Manual. And this manual is distributed to all of the stakeholders and users of the ground run-up enclosure, as well as any airline or operator that is doing run-ups at the airport. It is a thorough manual. I'm not going to go through the entire document, but I just wanted to show you that we kind of updated the graphics to account for the new runway and some of the taxiway reconfigurations in relation to the location of the ground run-up enclosure in the northern airfield. And so that document is posted on the website along with the Flight Quiet Manual. Both documents are available and updated on the website.
How do we go about updating the compatible land use map? One of our, in Bensville, one of our residential neighborhoods of 108 homes was acquired and rezoned to industrial. How do we do that?
Evan, that's pretty simple. If you have a significant land use change like that, we'll take the GIS shape file, and that's really helpful. We can then take a look at it, consult with you and your staff, and then color code it as needed. So feel free to reach out. We're happy to receive that for any of the villages at any time.
My staff's on this call, so there's your marching orders, guys. And then we briefly talked about 9C, 27C. I wasn't pleased with the rollout in November, but we're fully operational on that now. What type of numbers are we seeing, especially for the wide bodies? And I ask that because I think it lends credence to whatever that result is, may lend credence to closing 10C, 10L in Flight Quiet.
Ryan, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so we have been watching that. I don't have specific numbers for you today. That's something we can definitely put together for the next meeting if that's what you would like. But we have definitely been keeping an eye on the types of operations that are utilizing that new runway. And there are plenty of wide body aircraft that is a Group 6 runway. So we only have 2 Group 6 runways at the airport, 10 Center, 28 Center on the South Airfield and 9 Center, 27 Center on the North Airfield. And those 2 runways are designed to handle the largest aircraft in the fleets. And so we've seen those aircraft using that runway quite a bit. So we're happy to put together a report, kind of a fleet mix report showing the types of aircraft that are using that runway, since it's second opening, I guess we'll call it, on February 1st, when the airport really started utilizing that runway for operations.
Thank
Have
you.
another
That would
numbers
be
that you're
helpful.
looking for in particular?
Sorry, I cut you off.
What kind of numbers are you looking for? We can run them for you.
I think a fleet mix and then a utilization report, those together would help guide that decision-making process.
Yeah, no problem. We can do that.
All right, thank you. I see Ernie's hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, just a question. It was mentioned here that 9 Center, 27 Center is now fully operational. Are all the nav aids up and running now?
No, so I believe we're still at a category as far as when we're talking about the navigational aids, there's still some work to do, bringing it up to full capability that the FAA is working on. They have some equipment that still needs some burn-in time, but it's referred to right now as a category 1 runway, but there's still work to be completed to bring it up to a category 3 that would make it in par with 10 Center, 28 Center as far as weather conditions.
So we're still not fully operational to 9 Center that it will be once all the nav aids are in.
Yeah, to put it in a way, it hasn't reached its full potential yet.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ernie. I misspoke. That's an important clarification and something we should keep monitoring. Does anyone else have anything for the fact sheets, manual updates, or this tangent discussion regarding 9C 27C?
Ryan, are you going to go through the fact sheets?
I'm sorry, I only had the flight quiet and ground run up enclosure on the manual, on the agenda.
Those, or do you want me to pull them up?
Okay, we can do that.
I'm happy to go through them. I just need somebody to pull them up on the screen.
Which fact sheet would you like me to pull up here?
Let's do fly quiet first. So, Chairman, this will be very quick. So we took the opportunity to update both of the manuals and both of the fact sheets. And so we just want to show them to you so that you all have a familiarity. Both of the manuals are multiple pages. And so if you have any constituents that just want a shorter version, the fact sheets are probably the better option. So what we did on the bottom of the right-hand side, this is the fly quiet fact sheet. We updated the text for the test. And then at the top of the next page, we finished the text with regard to the IFQ, now that the IFQ is done. We swapped out the graphic in the middle of the left. Right there, you can see the preferential departures. So mostly just text edits on this one. All right, Ryan, let's go ahead and look at the GRE fact sheet. So again, Chairman, the same graphics on the left-hand side that Ryan showed you from the manual. That way everything's consistent. Again, these are printed or formatted for 11 by 17 paper, just printed double-sided and folded down the middle. This is a much shorter explanation in case you have constituents who are interested. And Ryan, do we have anything that's changed on the interior pages?
No, these remain the same.
Those are the same. All right, Chairman, that's it for the fact sheets, just similar changes to the manuals.
Thank you. And then we'll go right into airfield changes. Aaron, is that going to be you?
Yes, I'll go through that. Ryan, can you pull that up?
Yes.
So Chairman, as we've talked about, every 56 days, the pilots are given updates to all of the aeronautical charts for navigation. So all of the changes except one are on the north airfield. Ryan, can you zoom in on that little tiny thing over by, yeah, right there. So Chairman, there's just a little stub taxiway. You can see that taxiway Sierra Sierra. Ryan, can you highlight that? That is the remnant of the old runway 1533. So the taxiway Tango network still exists. We are making changes to the taxiways in that vicinity. So there's a little bit of pavement that's been closed. To go to the left of there, Ryan, right where that X is, so you can see some stub taxiways have been built. Those will be connected at a later time. And so you'll see more activity. We have a project in place today to take Kilo and Lima further to the east to connect them with Alpha and Bravo. So you'll hear more about that in upcoming months. Okay, and let's, Ryan, zoom out one click and let's look at the North Airfield. Yeah, so for all of you, the taxiways on the upper left in yellow, those are newly activated. They are part of the 9 right, 27 left runway extension network. All of those taxiways will help planes get to and from the runway or across the airfield. So you're seeing extensions of taxiway, golf, and hotel. You're also seeing a north-south extension of Bravo, Bravo. Ryan, zoom out one click and show Bravo, Bravo all the way from Echo all the way down to the south airfield. So Bravo, Bravo goes all the way north to south. Pan down, Ryan. You can see it goes all the way down to Southwest Cargo, which is the ramp in the lower left-hand corner for, Ryan, put your cursor on Bravo, Bravo. Yeah, that taxiway goes all the way down to the FedEx ramp. But that would be a lot of runway crossings. You would be crossing 3 runways. Okay, everything under blue is under construction. You can see the existing 9 right, 27 left, but that is closed for the season. On the left-hand side, you can see the extension of 9 right, 27 left outlined in blue. So that's pavement that's coming on board soon. On the right-hand side of the map, you're seeing some changes for taxiways in yellow. So there's some modifications to Golf and Golf 2. There's a renaming of the taxiways there to get you to the North Airfield. So that's called Tango Tango. And they're doing that just to make the nomenclature consistent. So you'll see more changes there as we connect all of the blue runway and taxiway pavement into the yellow. Are there any questions?
Seeing none, thank you, Aaron. We'll move on to the Fly Quiet Recognition Program. This is I don't want it to fall off onto the wayside, so I want to kind of start breaking this up. And Ryan and I have discussed ways we can do that, so I'll hand it off to Ryan.
Yeah, we kind of, do want to keep talking about the potential recognition program. And so we're kind of chipping away at it on each of these meetings, try and get a better idea of what the committee wants to do. And so we've talked about in previous meetings some of the potential metrics for a new Fly Quiet recognition program. Some of them are pretty straightforward. So we have
I'm fine.
So we have the ground run-up enclosure usage. So we'll just be looking at an air carrier's usage of the GRE, specifically those carriers that perform maintenance operations at the airport and have to use or are required to do run-ups, how often they're using the ground run-up enclosure for those run-ups. So that's a fairly straightforward metric and one that I'll be talking a little bit more about today. We also have fleet mix rating, something I touched on briefly, but would like to explore in more detail at a future meeting, which would be coming up with a rating for all of the airlines that operate at O'Hare, calculated based on the FAA's Part 36 noise standard certification. So the every aircraft that gets certified by the FAA, part of that certification is certifying it for noise standards when we talk about stage 1s, 2, 3s, 4s, and 5s. And so we can use that data to give, plug into a formula to create a rating based on the types of aircraft that an airline is using at O'Hare and how often they're using those aircraft. And with the idea of, penalizing airlines that operate louder aircraft more often rather than some of the quieter aircraft they may have in their fleet. And also potentially looking at time of day when those flights are scheduled. We also have our deviation from nighttime preferential flight tracks. So again, that would be looking at those deviations, the yellow, reds, and greens, how often an air carrier is deviating from the preferential flight paths at O'Hare, and coming up with an annual average for each airline and kind of plugging that into the overall score for a, lack of a better term, a flight quiet score for each airline. And then another metric we can talk about is preferential runway adherence, but that would be something that we would, I guess, at least discuss, including into the program at a future date once we have a new flight quiet program in place with new preferential runways defined. So that would be something that this committee would want to track, and obviously give kudos to those airlines that do their best to adhere to those preferential runways. So today, in the interest of time, we're not going to go into detail in all of these, but I do want to touch base on ground run-up enclosure usage. And although it is kind of a straightforward metric, there are some things I want to discuss with the committee to make sure everyone's aware. So you're all familiar with the ground run-up report, where we track each airline, the number of run-ups they do, whether it be by the quarter or throughout the year. What I'm showing here is the ground run-ups report for calendar year 2020 that goes into our annual flight quiet report. You'll see the total run-ups for each airlines and all airlines, the number of those run-ups that occurred in the GRE. And so you'll see, for instance, American Airlines here had 163 total run-ups in calendar year 2020. And that is regardless of time of day. 147 of those, they performed within the GRE. 16 of those were outside of the GRE, so they get a 90% usage of the ground run-up enclosure. So this can be a very straightforward metric for airlines that we can plug into the overall flight quiet score, if you will. The one thing I do want to discuss with you today is on this report, we have basically our two major carriers, American and United, as well as their regional brands, American Eagle and United Express. And then we have basically the other carriers that do occasionally perform run-ups. That's not a significant amount compared to American United, so this report really captures those two, but there are other airlines that do run-ups that would be included into the scoring metric. But one thing I wanted to point out is American Eagle is not one specific airline, and neither is United Express. Those are brand names, and they cover both United and American have agreements with several smaller regional airlines that operate under the name United Express or American Eagle. And so when it comes to the metric for ground run-ups, I would suggest that we would break these out. Each one of these regional carriers, does their maintenance themselves and operate their aircraft themselves, do the run-ups themselves. And so I guess the thought is we don't want to group those in specifically with United. We should probably break those out into their specific airlines, because when we look at the other metrics, such as maybe deviations from flight tracks, we may want to do the same thing as well and keep each airline responsible for their own aircraft. So I just wanted to make the committee aware that the United Express and American Eagle represent multiple different airlines that we would kind of break out individually, I think, if we're going to do a specific score for each airline.
Karen, you got your hand up?
Yes. So I love that this is a recognition program. I think that that's going to be more effective than focusing on maybe the deviations and kind of highlighting where airlines are not performing well. And I think one of the things we should figure out, and maybe those who have more direct experience working with the airlines can help with this, but I think we need to figure out what are the airlines looking for? Like, what do they like in terms of recognition? Do they want the publicity? Do they want it on social media? Like, how do we make this program mean something to the airlines so that when we provide the accolades of the airlines who are being a good neighbor, it's meaningful to them and it makes them want to continue their performance, and it makes those who maybe didn't do as well think about how they can entice, their, employees to be more mindful of what we're measuring and what we're asking them to do. So I don't have great insight into the airlines and what's meaningful to them, but I think that's going to be a key link to making sure this isn't just us once a year making an announcement that doesn't resonate with the airlines particularly. But I love it. I think it's a really good foundation.
That's an excellent point and something, I think we should definitely do at, when we get to a point where we think we have a good idea of kind of what things we're looking at as far as this program, we should definitely start talking with our airline partners and get their thoughts as to how, to your point, how that might be communicated in a way that resonates both with those that are doing a good job as well as those that may need improvement, and also making sure that we're not totally, off base and maybe giving a bad score to some area that may be outside the hands of the airline that's getting that score. So definitely, I think that would make this program have a lot more legs to it if we get the buy-in from the carriers that we're awarding.
So how can we do that? I think I definitely agree that positive publicity is what airlines want. How do we make sure that we are hitting the right chords with those airlines? Do we invite them here? Do we have side discussions with them? What's the mechanism to do that?
Well, I'll defer to Aaron a little bit here, but what I would say is that, I think we as a committee need to come up with kind of a firm idea of what the program is. But before rolling it out, I think the Department of Aviation would have a discussion with the airlines and introduce it to them, get their feedback, and potentially maybe even have representatives come to the committee and give their thoughts on the program. But I'll defer that to Aaron and the CDA, how best they want to handle that.
Yeah.
Do you think it would help if maybe we formed a committee to work with the airlines and maybe get together with them and see what would be the most appealing to them for us to do to award them and maybe give them good publicity?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Dennis. Let's not forget we are the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission, so recognition from one of the largest airports in the world probably goes a long way. Aaron, what do you think the best way to have that conversation is?
I would agree with Ryan. I think it's largely, Evan, what we're doing in Fly Quiet Committee. I think the committee has to determine what it's thinking about, and therefore essentially it becomes a proposal, and the CDA is happy to take that to the airlines and get feedback and report back, thereafter, and see if we need to make any edits. I think, a really positive outcome would be this is what the commission believes is important, and the airlines have no objections. And in that case, I think, that makes it much simpler, and we can implement it sooner rather than later. But yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I think you're at the point now where you just decide what's important to you. We'll package it and take it to the airlines and get feedback.
Yeah, no, I mean, feedback is important. I don't want to give airlines veto power over this, obviously, but getting their feedback would be appreciated. And then to circle back to Ryan's initial question about breaking the airlines out, I definitely think it makes sense to break them out. Obviously, we want to address things that are within an airline's span of control. So, and also there's the issue of, I see SkyWest Airlines operates United Express and American Eagle. So it would make sense that SkyWest Airlines executives, if they need to improve something, they're the ones that can do that and should be recognized for those improvements.
And it's also should point out that all the carriers that operate under United Express and American Eagle performed all of their run-ups, or at least 99% of their run-ups within the ground run-up enclosure. So we do want to commend those carriers for their good performance.
Okay. Do you have anything else regarding GREs?
No, not today.
So I think it makes sense, you know, we've got 4 different areas that we need to look at. One of those is still in the planning phase. We can't even address it. So GREs is something we've been tracking for a long time. It's probably the low hanging fruit that we can address. And does anyone have any feedback on Fly Quiet Awards as it relates to GREs? I see Mr. Ickes, your hand is up, and then we'll follow that up with Brian. Mr. Ickes, you're muted. Mr. Ickes, you're muted.
I just have a general question about not the need for GREs, but what leads up to it. Is O'Hare Airport a destination for service for these planes, or is it a place where they find a reason to service a plane when it's at O'Hare and they service it and then they do the GRE? In other words, are they flying planes into O'Hare for the express purpose of maintaining them, doing maintenance, which then would require the GRE?
Ryan, I'll take that. Frank, it's the latter. It's O'Hare is considered a light maintenance hub. It is not a heavy maintenance hub. So they're doing routine maintenance. And then if that maintenance happens to be on an engine, they will take it to the GRE, run the engine up to full power before they put it back in service. So it's very much the latter.
Okay, so they're not bringing planes in for service that would then require GRE.
Let's say an indicator comes on light during flight.
Okay.
You know, the landing is just fine, and they, you know, decide that they want to take care of it here. Then they're going to take that out of service, take it to the hangars, do the maintenance, and then take it over to the GRE if it's engine maintenance.
And that's fine. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to see if they were flying in specifically for service.
No, this is not a heavy maintenance hub.
Okay, thank you.
Like a Jiffy Lube, you know, no real maintenance.
Evan, that's exactly what I was thinking, Jiffy Lube, but I didn't want to lower the discussion to that level.
Hey, you know me, I'll lower that discussion any day. Brian, you're up.
Okay, I don't think the GRE should even be considered because, again, not every airline is going to be using it, and then they won't be considered for the award. And it doesn't affect the overhead noise. Fly Quiet is the overhead noise that the residents hear, and most people don't hear their usage. So I don't think the Fly Quiet or the GRE should be considered that much. It's the other 3 items I think are very good because it's noise overhead. And that's what we want to give them an award. Who can eliminate the most noise overhead? That's just my thought.
No, so you bring up a good point. Not all of these are going to be weighted equally. I think we need to recognize that GRE is a very small portion of the noise generated at O'Hare. So I would suggest we weight that accordingly. So while average deviation from nighttime preferential flight tracks and preferential runway adherence, those are very important to us, to your point. And GRE is probably smaller. So maybe we put GREs at 5% of the grade.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
And
All right.
Yeah, I do. And that's, you know, something I touched on in a previous meeting that we'd probably want to, you know, have the committee decide, you know, give weightings to each of these, you know, which one warrants more weight versus others, and also consider, you know, which airlines, you know, may not really have a need or opportunity, like Brian mentioned, to use ground run-up enclosure. But I do want to say that, you know, the ground run-up enclosure is an investment that the Department of Aviation did make because of noise impacts. I think that there are residents in areas close by the airport, Des Plaines and other areas that without that enclosure would be hearing significant noise caused by those maintenance run-ups that are sustained for a good period of time. And so that run-up enclosure does have an impact on reducing the overall noise impact on the communities around the airport.
Any other discussion of Fly Quiet Awards? All right, the next meeting for ONCC Tech will be May 18th, 2021. I'll take a moment of privilege and just request that everyone who can go get your vaccine. I'd like to see you all in person at some point, and the fastest way to do that is get your vaccine, and it's becoming more readily available, which is a good thing for everybody. We'll now move on to member comments. Do you have any comments from the members? Frank?
Yes, this was a request of Aaron and Ryan, since they seem to be putting together all the data that we are asked to look at here. I do research on for people that call me and say, hey, there was a loud plane last night. Can you look into it? And I'll go to the web track and grab a screenshot or two and submit them and ask for an explanation of why the planes deviated on their route so quickly, only to be told, well, we were in fly quiet. We were not in fly quiet that night at that time. So is it possible to label the day-by-day fly quiet intervals so that they're accessible while I'm looking up something up on the web track?
I would say yes, Frank. We did that during the rotation. That tracking is something I'd like to continue for the long term. So I will talk to the Landrum and Brown team and see if we can figure out how to integrate that into the regular fly quiet reports.
Well, that would be good. Instead of having an average fly quiet time or interval, if we can make it day by day, that way we could be more accurate in our responses to our constituents and citizens.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any other comments from the members? Seeing none, I know we have a comment from Mr. How do you pronounce it? Dan Dwyer. Dan.
Thank you, Evan. On the new permanent noise monitors, at least on paper, it doesn't appear that sites 38 and 41 have advanced. Can someone speak specifically to those and whether they're on track like the other two to be complete this year?
Hold on.
Yes, we have talked to Alderman Napolitano's office about sites 30, 42, and 41, or 43 and 41. We are waiting to confirm the location. We had run into an issue with site 38 in Chicago, Ward 39. We had to hire a surveyor. There were some issues with who owns the property that we plan to place the monitor on. So we're trying to resolve that and come up with a different location. And we're looking to package all these three sites together before we start any work. So yeah, we're still in the process of confirming the locations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments from the audience?
I move
Right.
we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Karen, and Jeanette, call the roll.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
41st Ward, Hanover Park,
Yes.
Itasca, Norwich, Norwich, Palatine.
Yes, yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Okay.
Yes, see most of you
Bamford.
Thursday.
Wooddale,
Yes.
and School District 59. Thank you.
Jeanette, I don't know if you said Schaumburg, but yes.
Yeah, I pretty much figured it.
Jeanette, that was a yes from Chicago 41.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
bye-bye.
thank you. Don't
All
eat
right,
the
be
yellow
safe.
snow.
Get those shots.